Dickson here, and this is a bust fade tutorial. We're taking this hair from this to this, and we'll show you how to do it. So first, after wetting the hair, we make sure the crown is sitting in its correct position. Then we section from the crown straight down to the recession point of the hair, which is the corner where your hairline meets. We push all the hair out the way, make sure it's nice and clean so you see what you're working with. We then switch to the other side and do the exact same thing. Again, crown to recession point. I'm just taking a little subsection here just because of the hair growth itself. It's quite a difficult hair to work with, being it's quite curly. And there you've seen it there. Crown to recession point, separating that, just making sure it's as clean as possible. Again, emphasis on how hard this hair is to section due to the curls. It can be done. We're just pushing all the hair out the way now, making sure it's nice and clean. You can see that section there, nice and clear. We know what we're working with, we know where we're going. I'm just doing a little bit of refining, resectioning, making sure that the hair growth goes where it wants to go, so that it makes it much easier and clearer to see what we are working with. I'll spin around now. You can see where that has been sectioned to the crown. So the next thing that I do is begin to cut it. Now what I like to do with these burst fades is I like a lot of weight on the side, just so I've got enough to play with. So I'm pulling this down and I'm going to cut it with block cutting motion. Small amount of over direction there, just because I want to keep the length on the back. And that there is my first initial guideline. And I just keep working that forward, combing down, combing into my fingers, keeping a small amount of the section previously. And that keeps me right on the length there, working right down towards the hairline. Combing it into place. Next, I tend to work vertically. I'm just pulling all the hair to that one initial point where the initial cut is, and you can see the shorter hair there. And just match it in, and what this is doing is just over directing the back into there, blending it in and maintaining the length. I switch them round, and I just repeat the process on the other side. Again, just using the block cutting, it's nice and simple, it's effective. Pull it down into my fingers, cut an initial cut. And there we have it, and I use that as a guide for the rest of this side of the hair. Again, pulling it into my fingers, keeping a small amount of guide from the previous section and working my way forward. Once that's finished, I just comb it into place, see how it's sitting. If I like it, I like it. And there I can just check in the shape right around. Now you can see the shape in the back. Right. So the next thing I do is I like to split the hair right down the middle. There we have it. The section from the crown right to the front of the hairline, separate that into two sections, keeping it as clean as possible. I do this based on the hair growth and the head shape as well. I just allow the comb to follow through and give me the correct section. I pull that out to the first initial guide and just make sure it's connected in by cutting it to that guide. And you'll probably see I'm elevating my fingers ever so slightly here, and that is only so that I remove a small amount of weight so that the initial cut doesn't get too weighty, and then I don't have to go in and take it out later on. Apologies for the blur. Flipping round, you can see that section right down the middle. And here we go, do it again, flip them, pull it right out to the initial guide, and just cut it with a small amount of elevation just to remove that excess weight on the corner there. Again, pretty much working the exact same as we did with the initial cut, just working our way forward, making sure it's all blended, comb it into place, see how it's sitting. Perfect. Next, I'm going to cut the top, and thanks to the fact I've pulled it on both sides, I've cut it to a length that blends into the corners. So when I pull this up, there'll be a short corner and a longer corner, or shorter at the side and longer in the middle. And that's a loose guide of what to cut on top. Of course, this is up to the client's discretion and your discretion, but in this case I just used my own judgment based on the length I took off the sides there. You can see I'm just matching that corner straight into the middle of the hair. Again, I'm just pulling it back and using that as an initial guide. Again, I tend to go in and just cross check my work anyway, so working like this, it doesn't really matter as much. The shape's been cut in and that's it. So that's one side done, and again I'm just double checking, making sure that I'm matching that corner of where I cut initially. There's a couple of bits that are just slightly longer there, just chopping them, no hassle. It's a fast and effective way of cutting hair. Doesn't have to be super precise all the time, as long as you're taking small enough sections and you do cross checking, you'll be fine. Again, combing that down, seeing how it sits, moving on to the other side, exact same. You can see the shorter hair where I've cut previously, just matching in that longer hair, making sure that I'm matching the corners. Again, cutting this to a square shape, only to keep a wee bit of structure in the hair, as it is curly, so it tends to have a naturally round shape. And with it being a bust fade, the silhouette at the side is also going to be rounded when you look at it. This keeps a little bit of structure. That was me just pulling up a little cross check there just to make sure that I'd cut everything that needed cut. Next, I'm going to tackle the fringe. Again, I'm just pulling that down, combing it down, and I tend to pull this down with the wide teeth of my comb. Reason for this is because the wider tooth of the comb keeps the hair in a more natural position rather than grooming it properly into place, so I can get a rough judgment of where the hair wants to sit itself. And I'm just using a little point cutting technique here with my Mitake scissors. Again, I'm just trimming it, shaping it. There's no particular way of doing this. I'm just doing it to the hair growth itself. You can see it springs up on this left side as you're looking at it, which is the right side of the head, but the little spring up there, hence why I'm using the wider tooth of the comb. I want that to sit as naturally as possible. And I'm just point cutting, I'm just trimming, strengthening up the fringe, make sure that it sits right. Again, just using it for a little bit of balance just to hold it in place because of the springiness. You can see how much stronger that sits, and it's sitting very, very naturally as well. This is how it's going to be worn. So by doing this, I'm not intervening with hair growth, I'm not forcing the hair into anywhere it wants to be, it's just going to sit. Just doing a little bit of refining there, catching any little flyaways of the curls, just to bring them into shape just a wee bit better, so make it easier to maintain at home for your client. And there you have it, nice and strong. Next, throwing a little bit of texture. See, I've asked the client just to bend his head down for the camera, but going in with my scissors, combing it into place. I'm going to use a little slice cutting motion in a minute. Here we go, little slice cutting. You can see some of the chips of hair just coming out. This is a good way of removing a bit of weight, also a very good way of adding texture as well. Acts the same as point cutting. It's a little more aggressive sometimes, but it's fantastic. And I'm working with the growth of the hair, looking at the individual portions of hair, where's thicker, where's thinner. I'm just taking out weight as necessary. You know, I'm just making sure that the texture's sitting right, and that's looking good. Moving on to the back, spin him round with the trimmers. He's already had a bust fade before, so this makes this really easy. The shape's there, but just cutting from a V up into the ear. A small tip for this is I tend to just put a very small V into the back of the nape, just as a reference point if I'm doing it for the first time. Again, switch to the other side, and this is all stuff that gets refined later. This is a rough draft, just sticking it in with the trimmer, the loose shape, and start seeing it come to. And here I'm coming back in, just refining that ever so slightly more, sharpening it up, combing the loose hairs down. Again, hitting it with the trimmer, catching all the loose hairs and just making this just as sharp as possible. It's quite hard. You can see obviously I've trimmed it slightly unevenly, but again the refining tends to fix this. The back of this has to be as sharp as possible because it's a main focal point of this haircut. With it being so sharp and so contrasted to the rest of the hair, the focal point is that it's one of the first things you look at. So having this as sharp as possible is only going to complement the haircut. Just cleaning out the bulk now, cleaning up the neckline, making sure that I've got a clean workspace. That's important. Again, switching to the side of the head, using my trimmer. I'm just going to make an initial bald guideline. Again, there's no real necessary height or way you could do this, but I just know it needs to curve around the ear for it as a burst fade. So I just use my own discretion on this, checking the hair growth, the hair shape, the hair texture, everything. I just make an initial bald line, clear out the bulk around the ear. Doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be there. Cleaning this up now, touching a small amount of the beard hair as well. Helps soften that so you can blend it out later. There we are. I'd already hit the other side, it appears, so just the exact same. I'm checking the balance. Next, going in with a foil shaver, pulling the skin slightly just so it doesn't tug. Foil shavers have a tendency to do this. Again, I'm just clearing out the rest of the hair, balding this out. As I get to the guideline there that I put in with my trimmer, I'm just making it a little bit softer with a little bit of a circular motion, a little flicking motion. Making sure it's nice and clean workspace, balding it right out. Here we have it. This is good. Be meticulous with this as well, because if you miss a hair, it'll be very obvious. The client will be able to feel any small amount of stubble and you'll see it. Next, we're moving on to the actual fading process. For this, 1.5 on the clipper. I use that as an initial guide up top to remove the bulk. I'm just following the initial guide that I cut with my scissors. You can see that at the top where the weight lies, hence why I use a club cutting motion. As it gains you a little bit of extra weight, it makes it much easier to see the shape of the hair you're cutting. And I'm just using the 1.5, clearing out some of that bulk. Again, this doesn't have to be perfect, it's just a loose shape. Following it round the same shape that I put around the ear. Just making sure that it's all nice and neat and I clear out as much bulk as possible. By debulking like this, it gives you a cleaner workspace so you can see where you're fading. So if you go to fade, say from like a bald line into just all that bulk at the back there, if you're doing a normal skin fade, you can't really see what you're doing. You might miss a little bump, scar, little mole. So it's important. Switching to my number 1 now, closed. You can see I'm just pointing where my comb, where that's going to go. Just maybe a 1/2 inch below that initial 1.5. Just banging that in. It's a second guideline. Again, following around the ear, following a very similar shape. Client did a little head tilt there, he was falling asleep in the chair, he's fed up on my shit. Again, open it right up and then push that right into the 1.5. So 1 open equals your 1.5, that blends that out. Nice and easy, soft, efficient, fast. Just what you want to shop for. And just a little bit of refining, making sure that's nice and clean, making sure it's even and it's properly blended out. Again, switching down just to 1.75 just to make sure that I really refine that blend as much as I can. Moving on now, I'm going to tackle this with the clipper closed, so full zero. I'm just tapping that initial bald line. This is going to just help soften that ever so slightly. The reason I do that is because it gets out of the way fast, so that you don't have to worry about getting rid of the bald line, you're just blending right into it. Again, following around the ear. This is me opening the clipper up to 0.25 and I'm just working it slightly up, using the corners of my clipper as well. That just adds a little bit of softness so you're not putting in a harsh line. You're just lightly flicking away the line that you've put in. And it does create a small guideline for your 0.5, but that's easily blended out. And I'm just switching to a 0.25 again, just hitting it with the corners just to really soften out the line between the 0 and the 0.5 that we've put in. Switching to a full 0 now, and again just attacking that very bottom line, making sure that it's completely gone. Using the corners just to chip away at niggly little bits, any darker spots in the hair, anything that you might have missed. Just makes this really, really clean. Next step now, switching to my 0.5 guard. There you have it, and it's fully open. And I'm just going to work that into the 1.5 that I've done up there. I'm just using a very light motion. I'm flicking this really lightly and into the 1.5 that we put up there. Again, this brings it in just a little bit tighter, a little bit softer, not putting anything harsh in. Attacking it with the 0.75 now, just move the clipper guard down. Again, using my corners and flicking that. I'm working my way down with a descending motion here and straight into my 0.5. And that helps fully blend out this last guideline. Client needs to stop trying to fall asleep, man. Luckily he's my brother, so I still hate him. Again, 0.5 fully closed now. Using the corners, just attacking the small amount of weight and dark spots within the hair. Changing up the angle every so often, just to make sure that I catch all the hairs as well. Sometimes you'll find it's hard to catch them. You can't just work in an up and down motion. You have to use the corners, switch the direction of the clipper, and that'll get the line blended right out. Next, guard is off. I'm just using the corners of the clipper itself with a half guard. Well, the half, which is clipper fully open. Using the corners, light flicks, making sure that I just get rid of all of that darkness. You can see it's really coming to now, it's blending itself out beautifully. Nice and light with it, just pushing out all the little dark spots. Little check there, that's looking pretty good. Here we are again, in with the 0.5, half open as well, and closed, just attacking a small amount of corner weight that I didn't like previously as I checked it. And this is me, I'm just going over and refining the fade now. And it's looking pretty smooth. You can't really see any lines from the bald right up to the 1 there, the 1.5, right up to the bulk. I'm just refining. Corner work, guard work, anything that gets it out. I'm just repeating the steps that I've previously went over, just to make sure that it's as clean as possible. Yeah. And for another little check, that's looking good. Looking very good. Oh yeah. Next, just repeat the process on the other side. Again, we're balding out, using the foil shaver, keeping it clean, making sure it's clear. And we'll soften it up as we get to that initial bald line as well, using small flicks and circular motions. And sometimes down the way as well, that tends to help. Moving that ear out the way, stretching the skin so it doesn't tug. All just making that clean work surface. Here we are, back in with 1.5, it's half open as well, I tend to use it half open. Again, just flicking away the bulk, right along the guideline of where I used my scissors. Again, emphasis on the club cut, and that's why I like to leave the little bit of weight there at the top. It gives me a clear, concise guide. You can always remove the weight, you can't take it back. There we are, just working in that rounded motion again, following the guide that I put in previously. Clearing out the bulk, making sure it's a clean work area and I can see what I'm doing later on. Meticulous with it. And that was just a little step back there, checking the balance, checking that the blending point along the weight line there is even on both sides. Which it is, of course, it's me. Rinse and repeat guys, going back in with a 1, making that guideline, following the guide round the ear, making sure this is nice and clean as well. Making a second guideline that we're just going to blend straight out. Almost seems pointless, but it helps to work to the system. Here we are, flicked it right open, blending right into that 1.5. You can see it's already softening that right up. And again, closing it again, slowly but surely, working my way down to the guideline that I've made. Already fading itself out nicely. It's probably one of the only times I've found my brother's hair really easy to do as well. Here we are, I'm attacking it with one closed now. Just flicking that line, really soft. It's not really, you can see it's barely touching his skin, it's barely touching his head. I'm just lightly flicking this out, making sure it's nice and clean. Looking good so far. Again, I noticed that I maybe went in with my foil just a little bit too harshly here, so I'm using the trimmer just to refine that guideline. And also soften up the line that we left with the foil. This will make it much easier to blend in with the zero. Just using the corners of the trimmer just to soften up that line and no more. This can happen sometimes. Just have to go back over it. Part of the process. Again, checking it's nice and balanced. It's looking balanced on both sides of the head there. This is good. Good foundations. Straight in again, attacking it with the zero, removing that trimmer line, using some of the corner work from earlier, making it go right round the ear, right round the initial guideline, clearing out that bald line, and open it right up. This is a half now, I'm just flicking it, getting confident, getting fancy, just flicking it right in. And again, I'm using the corners here just to flick into the one that we put up there. I've almost skipped the half guard at this point and I'm working my way down. Closing the clipper, working my way down to the zero. Again, using the corners with a flick, different directions just to make sure we catch all the hair. Super simple process. This is just the process that I use personally with every burst fade because it works. I'm just stretching the skin slightly here. The head shape is just allowing just a small amount of darkness, so I'm stretching it out and using the corners just to really knock out that dark spot. Again, if everybody could have perfect head shapes it'd be amazing, but we're not, so a lot of corner work in these. Now we're coming back in with the 0.5. Again, we're just attacking that blend nice and light. Just flicking it up, flicking it into where we've already worked. That was fully open, now we're half closed, working my way down. Slight C motion in the flick, I'm using my corners. Just keeping it nice and easy, nice and light. All the work's in the wrist really. Little flicks here and there, using the corners, getting rid of the dark spots, refining. We're now fully closed. Again, here we go. Just using the corners, working our way around. Sticking to the process that we had earlier on. A set process will always help your work. It helps you maintain consistency, it'll help you maintain knowledge, it'll help you know where to go next. Now I'm coming in, no guard. Again, just hitting the corners, using all different directions based on the hair growth itself and maybe the head shape. Just try and knock out that small dark spot there, you can see it, small amount of line. Now we're looking good. I'm switching over now, got my clipper comb, just putting it in and I'm just going to knock away some of the bulk. This is going to start blending the fade into the rest of the hair. Again, I'm just using it ever so slightly. I'm just picking up loose bits of hair and softening them right up. You can see it's already starting to work. Again, this is another reason I tend to leave the weight in my scissor work, is because I can come in afterwards once I've got a nice clean fade and just take it right off with clipper over comb. Working my way right along the head, using each cut as a guide from the other, and then refining afterwards. There we go. Working my way around, softening this up, making sure it's nice and blended, nice and clean. And sometimes I like to go in with the corners of my clipper as well, doing a little bit of clipper over comb, especially if I'm working vertically like that. It helps. Make sure you don't take off too much, make sure you blend it in properly. Here we go again, same process on the other side, using the clipper and just tapping it in. And I've inverted my clipper there, inverted my comb, just to make sure that I'm doing the exact same process as I did on the other side. I'm just picking out small amounts of hair, don't want to take off too much length from the back, just the bulk around the fade. Just blending it in, softening it up, making sure that it's all connected. Go in again, follow that shape round, using each cut as a guide to the next. Coming back in, refining, picking out small amounts, flicking as well. I tend to flick my comb as I'm working. I'll flick it up the way you see it. I'm turning the comb as I'm moving the clipper up it. That tends to keep a lot of the weight there and a lot of the length that you need, but gets rid of some of the unnecessary bulk around the fade. This is what I was talking about as well, using the corners of the clipper just to refine tiny amounts of the blend. Combing it into place, recombing it, pulling it back up and chopping it. It all helps. That's much softer now. And it's very even on both sides. It's a good check. Now I'm just checking the fade of the mirror, making sure it looks nice and even, which it does. It's clean. Next step, pull the Mitake scissors back out, come in, scissor over comb, nice and soft, using the wide end of the comb as well, just to keep that as natural as possible. Again, working my way up, softening up this blend straight from the clipper over comb. And don't want to take too much length off the corners as well, so I'm working in very small sections. And I've no real way of doing this. I'm just having a look, pulling it out. If there's a corner, I'm taking it. I'm also looking at the overall shape and the overall blend into the hair itself. It's nice and soft, nice and even. Light motions, I'm not taking a lot, but you don't need to. Time to make this really sharp. I've got the trimmer out, I'm going to start lining them up. First start at the C cup, making an initial guide. That's looking good. And then I just slowly swoop it round, natural line of the hair. You see that sharpening up nicely. Again, I take my time with this. I'm just refining as I go, making it sharp, making it clean. Nice fluid motions in the wrist as well. Pulling up, line off that hairline, box it off. Make that nice and sharp as well, that'll pop. Again, the reason for having these nice and sharp at the edges here is because of the bust fade being so soft and rounded, and the hair itself being so curly. It adds a soft shape to the hair, so if you come in with the sharpness of the lineup, it makes it pop massively. I'm just checking the texture of the hair here, checking the length, checking how it sits. And it's looking pretty sweet. I'm pretty happy with that. So guys, this has been Kyle Dickson here with a full bust fade tutorial. I hope you liked it and I hope it helps. Please remember, like and subscribe for more.